Channel 31 acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which this episode was filmed, the Boomerang peoples, and pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We extend those respects to the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, the land on which the Channel 31 studios are based. Hi, I'm Bridie Shepherd, and on The Eco Show today, I'm on the Mornington Peninsula at the Dolphin Research Institute. So today I'll be learning about the education program here and the amazing work they're doing to build resilience in the Bay. Let's go check it out. Based out of Hastings, the Dolphin Research Institute is the go-to for just about all things dolphin related in Victoria. The organisation works across 3 areas: conservation research, community education and environmental leadership. The Institute is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, and I'm excited to chat with one of the founding members and current executive director, Jeff Weir, to learn all about their work. I imagine you've seen a lot of change in this time.
I've seen a lot of change. A lot of it's actually positive. There's been some really good things happen in those 3 decades that often get overlooked, and lots of learnings, lots of achievements, lots of frustrations, and sort of, I guess it reflects just about the real world.
While most Australians have grown up understanding the importance of the Great Barrier Reef, you might be surprised to learn that the marine ecology of Victoria's bays actually rivals it. 90% of the marine species we have are unique to Victoria. In Port Phillip Bay, there are approximately 120 bottlenose dolphins and about 30 common dolphins. The fascinating thing about these common dolphins is that everywhere else in the world they live in open ocean, making this bay incredibly unique. So how did we end up with these beautiful creatures here? A handful of common dolphins entered our bay around 2005, and not only have they stayed, but they have absolutely thrived in our waters, with numbers increasing to about 30 in the past 14 years. It is great to hear dolphins are flourishing in our bays, but there are still many challenges for our waterways. Have you seen the effects of climate change in this area?
We're starting to see big changes. We're starting to see kelp forests thin out. We're starting to see species that would normally be New South Wales species from warmer waters coming down and being more consistent in here. They're catching bluefin tuna off southern and sailfish off Tasmania that used to be caught off Bermagui. We're starting to see things like more examples of things like blue bottles in our waters that were typically, on the New South Wales Christmas holidays, you'd see them on the beaches. We're also starting to see changes of animal behaviour. If there's one thing that we need to take away here is that everything's connected. And that you can't just look at the marine environment and say, that's healthy, or it's unhealthy. You've got to say, okay, the marine environment can only be healthy if everything that we do on land is healthy. So the issue of plastics and all the things that are washed into the environment, the marine environment every time it rains, they're the things that we need to deal with, and we need to deal with them better. So it's that big picture systems approach that we need to take more and more and more. And that's one of the real gaps with our thinking. We don't think like that. We just think about the plastic on the beach, or we just think about the dog poo on the beach, and we don't think that we're part of the problem. And so that's that big picture connections we try and build through our education programs, particularly our ICI Care Ambassador program.
Yeah, I think as humans, we often like to think of ourselves outside of the ecosystem. We don't often place ourselves back in, which is crazy because obviously humans are having such a massive impact on ecosystems. But you're finding that the community is sort of getting behind your cause and they're starting to become more involved?
Yeah, community involvement is really critical, though that it's not a deep thinking sort of process that we need to go to. It's about creating a tribe that value these things. And we do social research to try and understand what the community's thinking, whether it be how many of them, the boat owners, understand the dolphin regulations in terms of how to behave around the dolphins on the boat, or how many people actually associate the litter that's on a beach to where they live. And what we've found is that 2/3 of Melburnians think that the litter on the beaches is left by swimmers. So there's absolutely no connection between my street, my shopping centre, my home and what I do on the land to what goes on out into the environment. And so there's a strong disconnect. You've got to work on developing tribes of people where it becomes normal to be concerned about what you do, and working with all parts of the community, kids in schools as well as older ones, and then trying to change that way. And that's why long-term approach that we take is the only solution.
It is a matter of taking off the pressure as best we can so our ecosystems can bounce back. Jeff has shed some light on one way in which we are already doing that as a society.
From the point of view of here in Victoria, Port Phillip, without question, is healthier than it was 50 years ago. And there's been a huge amount of work to build artificial wetlands. And, if people think that, those lakes in the middle of new housing develops, they think that that's there for their pleasure. But reality is that's there to catch all the rubbish and all the stuff that's washed off the streets where they live. And then every decade or so, they've got to be cleaned out and taken to toxic landfill. And the reality is that almost every part of our life on the land ends up affecting the coastal marine environment. That's the reality of it. Even if you live up in the Dandenongs, it eventually comes all the way down either into Port Phillip or into Western Port. And the more we can deal with thinking about those terms, we've all got some sort of grate in our property. Either our drive goes down onto the road, or we've got a grate if our drive goes that way, and that just goes into the system, straight out into the bay. So we can get more stormwater litter traps, which are a big part of changing the system. And we can also be more careful. It's one of our wonderful graduate students who's probably been a mentor to me, has taught me a lot. And Marty always used to say, it's better to get a whole lot of people doing things imperfectly than to get a whole lot of really, really switched on people just doing stuff perfectly. So it's all about little changes together, because we're all a little part of the problem.
The Dolphin Research Institute is doing important work through their award-winning education program called I See, I Care. It is an innovative program run in primary schools around the state that encourages students to take initiative in conserving marine ecosystems. The program selects student ambassadors who act as leaders in their school community to make lasting change. Over 4,500 students have been ambassadors since the program began. I'm catching up with award-winning educator Mandy Robertson to learn more. How much do kids know about marine ecology these days?
Look, it's pretty varied, depends on the school, but many of the students that I work with are in a leadership program, so they actually apply to be an ambassador. So they're already quite into the marine environment and looking after, animals and things like that. But it does vary. What I do find really interesting is how switched on the kinders are, because they have sustainability so built into their curriculum that the 4-year-olds are just all over picking up rubbish and recycling and things like that, whereas sometimes it's not quite as embedded in the primary schools, and that's where we come in. We sort of run the leadership program as a way of embedding sustainability throughout the whole school, and we do that by working with small groups of students rather than trying to just teach everybody for a couple of hours. We have these small groups of students that we teach every term, and then they go back and implement ideas and teach the rest of the school community.
And in the program, what are you mainly teaching about? Is it about the dolphins, or is it about the environment or climate change, or is it sort of
It's
all those
everything,
things?
yeah. So depending on what our focus is of the term, it could, lend itself to the dolphins in particular. So one of the things we do with many of the school groups is actually take them out on a boat to go snorkeling. And if we're really lucky, we find dolphins and we get in the water with them. But I'm also really conscious to make the kids aware that, that isn't the be all and end all. And really it's about remembering that you're being a voice for this marine environment. So I'll teach them as many of the issues that it impacts that marine environment. So yes, climate change comes into that, but also local pollution, all our behaviour on land. And more importantly, then start to look at the solutions of what they can do individually, what their families can do, and their schools. Because obviously their schools are big communities, so they have big impacts, whether it's a negative or a positive impact. And we try and steer them to make some really good positive changes. So, yeah.
I love that they're becoming custodians of the water instead of sort of thinking about their place as just being, in the suburbs, in this house, sort of extending themselves out into the marine environment as well.
Absolutely, and getting that connection, through their local waterway or their stormwater creek.
Yeah.
For many of them, they don't live near to the beach. Some of them rarely ever go, so it's quite a different experience. But to understand that it still matters to them, where they live, even if they're an hour's drive, doesn't matter. It's still their backyard effectively, and they still impact it just like everybody else does, and they really see that.
Yeah, so it's also about building their confidence and their confidence to speak to the environment and be in a different situation and be able to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, absolutely, and have to talk to other people. I think if we don't give them a voice, I think we're failing them big time, because the young people have just as much invested in fact, I think they have more invested in this planet than any other generation, because they're going to be around the longest. So yeah, not giving them a voice would be a real failure on our part running the program. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that.
And so you found that you prefer not to just go in for, one day and educate students. You prefer to have the ambassadors come in and sort of educate those leaders and then get them to sort of talk to their peers?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most success that we have in long-term outcomes. And every year we get a new set of ambassadors, and they build on the legacy of past ambassadors. So some of our schools have actually been with us for nearly 20 years since we started the program. And the vast majority of the schools that I have now, because we have about 100, and I took over 10 years ago with about 25. So quite a lot of them have been with us for more than 5 years, after a sort of a big recruitment push. So yeah, and we do see change. We've asked the schools to tell us what's different now. So we get a whole list of initiatives. But really interesting over the last couple of years is I've been actually surveying the parents, and the parents are telling me, oh my gosh, my son or daughter's coming home and basically telling us off, saying you can't do that, and get rid of those plastic bags, and we're not doing this anymore, and we're not having straws, and all these things. So it is, I can see that the changes are really happening. So it's just...
So you educate adults as well, is that right?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I mean, often it's because they're coming down for a day trip, they want to do something different, they like to learn things, and they hear about us quite often through word of mouth. So many of the groups, their members will be members of multiple groups, so they might have come with a different organisation. They're grandparents, many of them, so I like to always, remind them that how they used to do things. Somebody gave me a great quote once, it called it Nana technology. So it was kind of like, live like your Nana, basically. So really get them excited about, again, where they live, where they've grown up. And then they can impart that, and inspire their grandchildren to get involved or get their school involved, and just love being at the beach, and just be a little bit more sustainable along the way. So
yeah, and I think that's such a good idea of having that intergenerational communication, because you can have, grandma walking along the beach, picking up some rubbish, and then the grandchild can say, hey, what are you doing?
Absolutely. So
wonderful. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, and all the best in your educating the future generations.
Great. Thanks, Bridie. It's been lovely to talk to you too.
You too.
A
Along with their very extensive school education initiatives, the team here at the Dolphin Research Institute are running their core research project and 2 citizen science programs. Citizen scientist is still a fairly new term. It refers to members of the public who support researchers by collecting or analysing data based on their own observations. For the Dolphin Research Institute, this involves the general public collecting information on whales and dolphin sightings in the bay. This information can be entered into the PodWatch app, which was developed right here in the Institute. According to Research Officer David Donnelly, there are hundreds of people contributing as citizen scientists, and the demographic is incredibly varied, ranging from kids all the way up to seniors. I'm about to speak with him to hear more about their research.
So do you see whales and dolphins as a bit of a gateway animal to sort of broader marine ecology?
Absolutely. Yeah, whales and dolphins, we kind of treat them as flagships. It's to grab the attention of people. They're passionate, they can connect with another mammal more easily than they can connect with a sea urchin perhaps. But if we can get them connected at that level, it's important for them to then probably try and I guess find the information through our community education programs, which drills down a little bit into ecology, and therefore we're hoping that people will want to protect the bay and the oceans just a little bit more based on their passion around marine mammals.
So suddenly they start getting excited about seaweed and
absolutely.
Things, yep.
Yeah, well, the seaweed's a great example. Humpback whales tend to play with seaweed a lot, and we can use that cue to talk about ecology and the disappearance of some of our kelp forests down here in the southern parts of the coastline.
I was very excited to learn that whales and dolphins enjoy playing with seaweed. While it is important to not anthropomorphise them, seeing this does enable us to emotionally connect with them, which can be one way to encourage us humans to change our behaviour.
Dolphins, and I suppose whales as well, can be an indicator of how well the marine environment is doing, is that right?
Yeah, surely they are marine top predators, particularly the dolphins around here. And because they're resident, they have a longevity in a spatial representation of what's going on in their habitats. So yes, of course, top predators are a very good indicator, and we can measure that to some extent by the appearance of the animals, their body condition, their skin condition, and trying to map those, those shortcomings in their health to help us understand how the environment's doing and how those dolphins are responding to some of the pressures that we put on those environments.
And how's the bay looking at the moment? Is it quite healthy?
The bay seems to be quite healthy. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. We've done better in the past, of course. We've removed scallop dredging from Port Phillip, but also with us being in lockdown, things have improved. Fancy that, hey? There's certainly a lot of fish, very small fish. The recruitment process has been very strong this year, particularly with snapper, which will reflect very well on the dolphins in the future, we believe. And of course, just the simple presence on the water. So litter is down. It's fantastic.
And so you're saying that dredging is no longer happening in the bay. Was there a lot of dredging at one point and now it's sort of stopped? It's not an ongoing process?
Yeah, that's correct. So scallop dredging was a big industry for a long time in Port Phillip. I remember as a kid seeing dozens and dozens of scallop vessels going backwards and forwards across the bay. And of course, if they're dredging, they're pulling up the substrate or the bottom, which disturbs a lot of species. And that's where it all starts. That's where the ecosystem starts, in the bottom and even below the surface of the substrate. So since that's been removed, that's been a long time now, there's been seagrass beds coming back. And of course, if you've got seagrass beds, you've got habitat for nurseries for small fishes. And if you've got that, then you've got prey for dolphins and other things like dolphins, such as birds and seals.
Can you tell me about dolphin distancing? Something you're advocating for at the moment?
Yeah, dolphin distancing is a new initiative we're trying. We've been trying for many, many years, in fact 3 decades, to try and educate people on how to behave around cetaceans, whales and dolphins, particularly the dolphins in the bay, our resident communities. And one of the ways we've decided to approach it on this year, and summer is the peak time, is to introduce dolphin distancing. Obviously, distancing is a term which is familiar with everybody's head at the moment. So connecting with that helps people to understand that dolphin distancing means something meaningful, rather than just a regulation. So what we're hoping to do is to engage communities, get them to sign up to be dolphin distancers and maintain their 100 metres distance approach in the vessels, and maintain 300 metres if you're on a jet ski. And of course, even paddle boards and kayaks are considered vessels. So we need to make sure that they also stay 100 metres away. And that's our initiative this year, to try and help that along. As I say, we've been trying for 30 years to get the message across, and it doesn't seem to be working in the ways we've tried previously. So we're trying something new.
So if you see dolphins out on the bay, you can go close to them to have a bit of a look, but try and stay that 100 metres distance if you're in a boat.
Yes, 100 metres is the minimum approach distance for boats, and quite often the dolphins will approach you. And if that does happen, the best thing to do is just maintain what you're doing, keep a straight line, and don't change anything to do with the motor. And as the dolphins have finished interacting with you, they'll just move off, and you can move off safely also. And that's what we want. We want everyone to be safe. We want to keep the dolphins in the bay. We want them to continue to grow in numbers around Mornington in particular. And the way to do that is to respect their space and their environment.
What sort of things do you do here?
So basically I've been tasked with the Dolphin Skin Health Project. So basically some dolphins in the bay were turning up with some skin lesions, and Jeff and his team were quite concerned that it is due to anthropogenic factors. And there has been plenty of research on this in this sort of field discussing very similar things. And it does seem to be that the dolphin skin is very closely related to what's going on in their environment, as well as the stress and the individual health of the animal itself. So we've basically just been doing some research. I needed to get a very good grounding in what I was going to be really doing. So I've been using a program called Skin ID, and basically what we've been doing is uploading pictures of the dolphin flank. So we need to get about the same angle every single time. And we need the fin to be showing so we can identify the dolphin, and the same amount of flank. And then we mark and quantify using a polygon the amount of skin lesion that we can see. And the idea is that over time, we can compare the dolphins, see if they've healed, see if their situation has gotten worse, see if they've picked up anything new, see how long the lesions seem to last, do they leave any scarring, and really just get a good idea of the health of the dolphins in our bay, especially as it does seem to be so closely intertwined with the health of the bay itself.
And so where did your interest in marine animals and dolphins come from?
Yes, so my whole life I've always, even from a painfully young age, I've always been so interested with animal health, the environment. We share this planet with 3 trillion other species, and yet we seem to treat it like it's only ours. And like our actions are never going to have consequences. And really, I feel like the new generations are more and more aware that our actions do have consequences. Things are getting visibly worse in front of our eyes. And it's just so important that we care. And these dolphins, they're canaries almost. They really show us the bay is not as healthy as it looks.
It's been a really exciting day on the peninsula. I've learnt so much about marine ecology and also about the amazing education programs that are happening here. See you next time on The Eco Show.